Hey guys, hope everybody can hear me okay. Hey, somebody give me a heads up if you can see the video okay. Sound is all right. Awesome. Okay, so cool, we're having school, like that's exciting. Okay. One of my former students. And that student had been in my class my first couple years teaching at this school, and now all of a sudden that kid was going to be our speaker. Knowledge when I was a kid here and not now coming back. And then my story with HIV, I've worked with a lot. I ended up working with the AIDS organization. I helped start the first statewide AIDS service organization in Colorado. I served on their board of directors, AIDS archives. And there were like a lot of moments that really changed me. And I wanted to share one. This is a copy. And if we see each other in person again, I'll show it to you sometime. But let me hold it up here close. You can see that. These are names on here of people who were in this AIDS ward in San Francisco General Hospital. And the nurses decided to start writing down everybody who was dying because nobody was paying attention, and they were people who'd kind of been forgotten. It was sad. People were so freaked out about this disease at that time that they just like quit. As you can see, it went from like, let's make them pretty big. Study this, you can actually see that like one room, there'll be somebody dying almost every other day in that room. And this book, man, to like touch this book is really eerie. I just like even had like a ghost experience around this, which I can tell you about some other time. But it was pretty crazy. That book itself was intense to like look at. And so I've had, now I have a lot of friends through working with all these organizations who have HIV. It's personal to me. And my fear is that when we don't really be honest with you about past pandemics, then like we may not be able to get to, I don't know, save your life. Like I would hate for anybody to come back with this from you guys. So I just kind of want to share the story a little bit, not as much detail as I would like if we were in class, because I want you to be able to ask questions, and it's a little hard to do questions and respond to live chat. So hey, mystery cards trying, right? There's, I guess, a lot of teachers across the country that aren't even connecting. So I'm sure. So everybody's like trying to figure out how to get this. Man, I'm sorry. I don't have a headset. That would really be helpful. I can move this a little closer, maybe. I don't know. Or I can talk louder upstairs. No, dude. I'm like still playing Monopoly by myself. All right. Well, if it doesn't load, you guys can always watch it later. Sorry about that. It's kind of cheap. Okay, so I'm gonna just do my best, and hopefully you can hear me. I'll try to talk really loud so that the microphone at least picks it up. Okay. So I want you to imagine this jar of, even though we've got the internet and should have way more knowledge than ever before, it doesn't mean that we necessarily do. Okay. So here we go. Let's see what she say. Okay, so here we go. So a virus will enter our system, right? So I put this virus in here, and it's going to slowly, right, start to dissipate through the water. And that virus will enter our community. It depends on how it gets here, right? It could just be somebody bringing it in. It could start here. Just because the virus is started in Asia doesn't mean it can't start here. Please quit calling it the Chinese virus. Like, that is so bad on every level. I don't know what our president is doing on that, but you should not call it that. It has nothing to do with Chinese people. Viruses start all different places. So it has nothing to do with the group of people. So cut that crap out right now. But that's going to go into what we're going to talk about. You can deal with it. Another is fear. People immediately start to be afraid. They're like, oh my God, I don't know how to deal with this. This is super scary. Like, what am I supposed to do? And so they react with fear, right? I'll show you this in here when I get it set up. There is scientific conflict. So people start trying to put out ideas, and people are saying we can cure it with this, or we can do this, or maybe one place is testing. Another thing that's really big is, of course, ignorance. So people start acting with ignorance, and these really become blindfolds, right? Let me just put that on here. And then the other one is stigma. And this is happening right now, right? We're blaming one group of people that have nothing to do with it, but the stigma gets to be a part of that, right? And now all of a sudden we've got all of those problems. Okay, now what happens is that all those things cover the jar. And so I'm not really now paying attention to the jar, I'm paying attention to all those conflicts. But what happens is the virus is still spreading. And so we're not paying attention necessarily. We think it's not about us, or like, now I'm mad about the quarantine, so I'm not paying attention, or I'm mad about the fact. And so all those things are happening, right? But the whole time the virus is spreading. And it can be a global issue, it could be a local issue, but that virus is spreading. And the whole time that it's spreading, all this covers it up. Because if we don't actually remove those blindfolds of ignorance, stigma, fear, political conflicts, scientific conflicts, and now I'm going to add media, right? Because that's a whole nother ballgame. Wasn't any of those things, all of that covers this up and we don't see what's going on. And so when we finally remove the blindfold and we realize what's going on Google Hangouts, a couple friends of mine in Sacramento, and one of my friends, Dana, she is in charge of the health department for the state. And she was telling me how like AIDS is still a pandemic. And she goes, and those were the lessons we really needed to learn. And she goes, so hopefully people paid attention in the health world. But hopefully people, your age group is half of all new cases. And so it's not really something we can ignore. Okay, so let me put this down. Okay, let me check what you guys are saying here. So if it doesn't work, I mean, when we're done, like, I'll just upload the recording, right? So, I mean, that's really all. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Well, we'll see. Hey, you know, doing what I can do down here. So if you can't really see, you know, if it cuts out, just wait. I'm doing the best we can do. Okay. Let's see. I know it's frustrating, y'all. We don't have the best technology. If it really works, if like we really try to do this, maybe tomorrow I'll go back upstairs in my house and do it. Although I'm not really sure if it's the Wi-Fi, but we'll see what happens. Okay, so let me just give this presentation, and then later you guys can fix it. I mean, watch it if it doesn't work. Okay. So HIV and AIDS. So here we go. Ready? All right, so let me just go over how many cases they are so you can kind of see that. And I guess I can attach this in an email later if people wanted to look at it. All right, so talking about a lot of this, right? So worldwide, if we're talking about a bag of rice, right, we're talking about 150 some of these bags of rice. So there have been 35 million people that have died since it was first discovered. In just 2018, there was 1.7 million new cases every 12 seconds. Let me pull this a little bit closer. Does that help, maybe? Okay. There were 1.7 million new cases. So it's a new case about every 12 seconds. New deaths in 2018 is actually down. For a long time, it was in the millions. Every time it'd be like 1.2 million, 1.5 million. But now we're learning to knock that out. So it's 770,000. Oops, sorry, there should be another zero there. UNAIDS estimates that it's going to cost the U.S. $26.2 billion. I mean, not just viruses, like we're already taking care of viruses. So it's not like a new thing. It's like we've got to deal with all those budgets, right? It's not like just that one thing. Let me move this out of the way here. Hold on. And I can go to the other. People died in 2017. Let me say something about why it's not current. They take numbers every few years. So if you're like, Ricard, it's 2020. I'm aware of that, but like recent numbers on this stuff are not taken every year, okay? There's a new case about every 9.5 minutes in the U.S. California, there's 126,000 people, right, living with HIV. Total deaths have been 55,000. And then new cases, there was 4,495 in 2017. And 1,702 people died. So just in California, like we're not talking about a game. And if you go to this website, which I can link later, you can look at by county exactly how many cases there are. It's like a pretty cool map that pulls up. County of Alameda, which is massive, right? County of Alameda has 408 people who are living with HIV for every 100,000 people. There's 1,100 people, right, in Alameda County that have HIV. Okay, so it's a little more than a half a cup of rice. Okay, it doesn't seem like a lot, maybe, but really that's a lot of people. So it's not. So it's still like an actual goal on everybody's, you know, on their radar. All right, let me see what she's saying. You guys are hilarious. The hidden power to tell her you're funny. Anyway, okay, next, ready? Okay, so let me talk about what this virus is. Okay, so HIV is called the human immunodeficiency virus. So it's by itself, that's HIV. Immunodeficiency means it's going to affect the immune system, okay? AIDS is actually different. So AIDS, hold on, messing this up. Oh, it's this one that's in the way. So, something's in the way. What's in the way? Okay, so AIDS is acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. So what happens is you will have the virus, and then after a while, the virus gets bad enough in the body that you have now a syndrome. So you actually do not die of AIDS. You have HIV, and you're going to die of something that AIDS gives you, a syndrome effect that it will give. Trying to make it the Chinese virus or the whatever virus, or at this time it was the gay virus. That's stupid because it's called human. It doesn't matter where it starts. It doesn't matter who gets it first. At the point that it's human. So all the stereotyping or all that nonsense needs to go away. Okay. What are you guys talking about, Peter? Okay, this is actually new. They didn't understand this until recently. So it's found in blood, it's found in semen, it's found in vaginal fluid, and it's found in breast milk, and it's found in anal mucus secretions. Okay, I'm not trying to be graphic. I'm not into the ignorance, and I don't want no one can come to me and say I didn't tell you. So I really want to make sure that you understand, okay? And you can't. It's not found in saliva in infectious amounts, so you can't get it from kissing, like. That kind of thing doesn't happen, okay? So there's all this nonsense about you can get it in a sneeze, you could, like, all that stuff was not true. These are the only, and you have to get, it's not enough to get them on your skin, of SIV, simian immunodeficiency virus. And they have this naturally in their bloodstream, okay? And we've genetically traced this actual virus back to the late 1800s. The virus jumped from chimpanzees to humans, okay? And basically, it's going to originate with hunters who were exposed to that virus. So they are eating chimpanzees as a natural meat source. And as they're eating these chimpanzees, what's happening is basically, as you're chopping that meat up, right, you're getting little micro cuts in your hands. And now I've got that chimpanzee blood in my hand. And what would have happened is a hunter would have gotten it. He would have gotten sick for a little bit, but then he would have gone on and probably been fine. Like not everybody, he wouldn't have passed it to everybody. He might have then died from it a while later, but it probably wouldn't have been passed to lots of people. But eventually people getting it all of the sudden now are passing it human to human. Okay. So it jumped genetically from chimpanzees. It did not happen because somebody was getting busy with a chimpanzee. So stop that nonsense. I know somebody would ask that if we were in person. So just stop. That's not it. It's hunting rated from remote areas to larger cities and increased populations, for example, around diamond mines. So when they discovered diamonds, for example, in South Africa, all of a sudden all these people started coming out to go work in these mines. And when they came out to the mines, they suddenly are now in bigger areas and bigger cities. And where you have more people, you will have more sex, period. So people also set up brothels and they were having sex in these brothels. And so people were then also like, it's also going to travel out throughout the world from points throughout Africa. So now you've got travel happening, right? And you're going to spread that out. Also, the thing that caused it was efforts to vaccinate. And if you can see in this picture down here, we were trying to eradicate smallpox. So we were going around diseases. So what was happening is they were actually taking a needle and they would poke this, have a little bit of virus on that, and they would poke the smallpox virus dots, and like, that's a smallpox vaccination. So they would have that, and you would go around and they would like poke it a bunch of times. But then they'd take that same needle, put more virus on it, and go to the next person. And then they would do that over and over. So everybody was actually giving HIV an amplification system too. So in trying to wipe out smallpox, they actually ended up not knowing that you had to have different needles. We know that, so don't stress out. If we get a vaccine for Corona, we're going to do it right. But at that time, they're just putting that into every single person, and now everybody was getting it. Trying to wipe out one disease, we end up infecting everybody with HIV. Okay? Same needle was used over and over, and that's what went wrong. Okay, let's see. What do you guys? Oh my God, you're killing me with all of these, Justin, with your little shots here. Hilarious. Called tallpox. You're hilarious, Peter. I don't know, but there definitely would be some people that have it. Ha ha ha. Kidding. Okay. Let's see. Okay, next. So HIV is a retrovirus. So it replicates by inserting its genetic blueprint into a host cell and changes the cell's DNA. So this is important one. If you look at the virus video I showed, how it goes into a cell, it's going to actually take the genetic blueprint and change that genetic blueprint. So it's not just using the cell as a factory, it changes the genetic blueprint. And it hijacks what are called the CD4 white blood cells, or T cells. And if you watch the virus video, T cells are actually what helps us to fight off disease. So CD4 white, this virus is so tricky because it takes the exact thing that we need to fight off disease and turns it into a factory to make more disease. Okay? Let's see who else is on here. Nam. Hey, Nam. I know Nam would have like 750 different things he would want to say. Okay. So then there is acute, there's 3 stages of HIV going to AIDS, okay? So stage number 1 is acute primary infection. And what this is, seroconversion takes place in the bloodstream 2 weeks after exposure to a few months. So what happens is at first you get infected. So if I was to get pricked with a needle with HIV today, I would get that virus. 2 weeks later, I would start to go through seroconversion. And 2 weeks later, after I got infected with HIV, I might start to get flu-like symptoms. But that only occurs in about 50% of the people who get this. So in those people, they might feel this cold or flu. My friend Gary had a flu for like 3 or 4 weeks. It kind of hung on, and then it just disappeared. And then you have no symptoms. So the crazy thing is you would not even know you had been exposed. And this is the thing. We don't tell you how to protect yourself in sex. And so because of that, you might be out there playing around with this virus. You don't know it's there. You can't tell anybody has it. There's actually a lot of people who have it that don't tell people they have it. That's scary. But what happens is that you would not know, and you would probably not even get tested. So unless you do regular HIV testing, which you should, you're sleeping with anybody, you later on in life, like anybody that I'm going to get in a relationship with, I'm definitely going to make sure they're tested and I'm tested, because here's the deal. You don't know, right? And you're playing with fire because there's no outwardly symptoms. You would not know anybody has HIV by just looking at them. All right. Then after you've been infected, you're going to go through an asymptomatic stage where anywhere from 1 to 10 years it'll take for you to start showing symptoms. There are some extreme cases of it that go from this primary infection to actually having symptoms within a year. But usually it takes about 10 years. So for 10 years, if you're not getting regularly tested, you could have it, not know it until you really start to get sick. Okay. Let's see. You guys are hilarious. You're all trying to do this in the gaming thing. All right. So then, after you've gone through all this, and by the way, it would take you probably 3 months for the virus to show up on a test. So if I went today and got an HIV test and it said I don't have it, I would literally have to wait 3 months without having any unprotected sex to make sure. Because if I got it today, it would take about 3 months for it to show up on a test, okay? So let's say I don't even know about it. 10 years passes, 1 to 10 years, and all of a sudden you're starting to get symptoms. And what happens is your T cell count begins to drop, and a person begins to experience various opportunistic infections, meaning your immune system is down and you're going to need some different, you're opening your body up to different illnesses. And like rare things, like people started getting diseases that cats have, that sheep have, all these strange things started happening. And so what goes on is your T cells become so low that you actually now are going to give an AIDS diagnosis. So in a single drop of blood, you have about 1,500 T cells. When that T cell count in a single drop of blood drops down to 200 T cells in a single drop of blood, you are actually given an AIDS diagnosis. And you now, once you have that, it's really hard to come back up from 200. But if you are able to recover, which people do, you still keep that AIDS diagnosis. You don't go back to HIV, okay? So once you get to 200, even if your count goes back up to 500, you're still stuck with that AIDS diagnosis. All right. Okay, so an average healthy person, right, has between 800 and 1,500 T cells. When that drops to 200, right, then you're given an AIDS diagnosis. Once that T cell count actually drops to 35 T cells in a single drop of blood, it is super hard to recover. I only know one person who did that personally. There's a few cases, right, but it's super hard because now you're basically getting every disease. This is why us staying home with corona is important, because there are people, whether it's HIV that gives them an immune system problem or anything else, when your immune system is attacked, and you can have lots of immunodeficiency diseases. HIV is only one. There are lots of immunodeficiency diseases, okay? But those T cells are what we're trying to protect in people. We want those people with immune deficiencies to keep all their T cells, okay? And if we are walking around giving them corona, then what happens is their T cells start to drop drastically. So in any case, you get down with T cells and you're in trouble. So this is another reason why we have to stay home and be more vigilant, okay? Hopefully that's making sense. Jackum, I don't know, 10 more minutes? If you want to go, you can go. I'm just trying to get through all this. I know, it's a lot. Okay. So HIV today, there's very effective drug treatments. They give a mixture of 3 drugs instead of 1. They figured out they could trick the virus. If they give it 3, it can't mutate. And so they give 3 drugs in 1. So now they have like a 1 pill that can be all 3 drugs. But now there's a really, life expectancy is very normal. But it can be really expensive. Those drugs can be $30,000 to $50,000 a year. There's also something called PrEP, which is preventative. So you're actually taking small doses of this cocktail drug to ward it off. So before, like if you know you're going to have lots of unprotected sex, then you take this ahead of time. But they don't really know what the long-term effects of that are. So that's kind of dangerous. Don't fast forward, you guys. Just and don't spam me. You're killing me, Gary. Okay. There still are side effects are long-term, and they think it could become ineffective. So it's not really a total solution. So we're going back to these. These are all the things: stigma, fear, political conflicts, scientific conflicts, and ignorance. And all these things kind of played into that indifference, okay? So I'm going to go through these really quick. If you guys want me to cover them more later, I will. So I'll just go through these really quick. Just give me like 5 minutes here. Okay, so first of all, stigma. The first 5 cases that were reported, so keep in mind that's not the people necessarily who had it, but the first 5 cases were in gay men. And that's because when you have gay sex, and I just want to be honest here for a second, there is less layers of skin, and so there's more little micro tears. So whenever you have sex, there's little micro tears in the skin, and that's how fluids are transferred bodily. Okay, so I'm just being real with you. There's little micro tears. You can't feel it, but that's how different diseases get in when you're having sex. Okay. Also, IV injection drug users, and they're actually worried about the opioid crisis right now, bringing this back, and that could be a huge deal. But also, they saw some Haitian immigrants. Now, this is like, here's how it works. If I said, hey, there's 5 kids in Miss Ricard's history class that have this, you'd be like, oh, well, it just must be kids that are high schoolers. Well, that doesn't mean other adults weren't getting it. It's just be like, if I only saw the first 5 cases in teenagers, I might assume it's only teenagers, right? So at first we were even saying, well, coronavirus is just in China, right? That's dangerous whenever you say, well, I only saw it here first, so you stay focused on that. But we did. The United States stayed focused on this. In fact, lots of countries in Africa were calling and going, hey, we've got people who have it here. And we're like, nope. We know what it is. We're the only ones, right? Media and political leaders blame the disease on behaviors in certain groups. And when you do that, you're asking for trouble, because then people go, I can't get it. Like, I've even been hearing some students say, well, African Americans can't get it. That's not true, right? But you hear those ideas and you think, okay, well, it's not me. I can't get it. So we have to be really careful. Stigma is important. You hear about somebody, you go, it must be them. People blame the Haitians. They blame the drug users. Those were groups getting it for sure, but it wasn't the only groups, okay? Sexual disease is also seen as negative behavior. So because people don't want to talk about that or be real, then they just assume that, like, this is bad. And then also religious stigma played a role. Like, it's a punishment for behavior. If you get a sexually transmitted disease, people would say you deserve it because, well, too bad for you. So all this stigma plays a role. If you have any questions about that, can you email me questions? Because I want to make sure you guys understand, because I feel really, it's dangerous to just teach this without you having a place to talk. So there was fear. People started to be stigmatized if their status was revealed. We found out it was in the blood supply. Hemophiliacs are people who cannot clot blood on their own. So they have to get injections of blood transfusion, clotting factor. And that clotting factor we found out was poisoned with HIV virus. And so what happened was, because you're taking all this blood supply and you didn't have a test in the beginning, people were getting this blood supply and getting the disease. And so medical professionals and hemophiliacs really tried to speak out, because they were like, people didn't want to take care of anyone in the hospitals because they were so scared. But because it was mostly affecting young men who were previously healthy, it really freaked people out. It had symptoms that were like Kaposi sarcoma, which is this rare skin cancer, which was these big purple splotches, a type of pneumonia, AIDS, dementia, where they just weren't right anymore. And people were like 25 years old, but with dementia. Wasting syndrome, which is where you just kind of get so skinny because you can't keep any weight on. And rare diseases like toxoplasmosis, which was a cat disease, but people are getting these rare diseases. Can't really see the bottom of that. And so it got scary, but it's all about fear. Then there were political conflicts, of course. Should we fund it? Political figures didn't want to address it. There was a ban on certain groups from giving blood, a ban on HIV positive people from traveling or even coming here. And then the sad part is, we didn't have a plan for how to deal with HIV. So the first cases are in 1981. We don't have a plan until 2010. Obama's the first person to actually make a United States plan on how to deal with HIV. It takes us from 1981 to 2010 to make a plan. And that's crazy, but it's based on stigma. So that's why right now with Corona, we're like, no, plan now, quarantine now. Like, they're not fooling around, because we fooled around on this one. Also, people said you should only teach people about abstinence, and abstinence is great. Not having sex is going to be fine for some people, but not everyone's going to do that, which is why we need comprehensive sex education. And a lot of places don't think we should teach that. You should teach this, abstinence, and not teach anything else. And I think that's stupid, because we need to make sure that you're aware. Why am I going to teach you to write an essay, but then not educate you on how to protect your life? That's ridiculous, right? So we need to make sure we're actually protecting people. What was Obama's plan, Karen says? So one, it did involve a lot of trying to get education right. So there's a lot of work right now trying to get schools to teach the correct thing. That's part of his plan. It was also about to offer more testing, making testing routine, putting things in the doctor's office to say you're going to have an HIV test, like making it more of a routine, like you get a checkup. That's part of it. I can find more on the plan and send that to you, or we can have a chat about it offline. But he got a lot of credit for that because nobody to that point did that. Not Clinton, not Bush, not Reagan. Reagan, for sure, when it came out, didn't even talk about it. For the first 4 years, when people were dying, he ignored it. So that's kind of a big thing. But I'll look back through these comments and get you guys later. For sure. Okay, I'm almost done, Jack. Okay, so scientific conflicts. There was competition to find the virus. There was lots of confusions on how you could get it, kind of like now with Corona, like how do you get it? There's competition right now to try to find the virus. But the competition created between scientists and countries became this challenge, actually, because people wanted credit. So actually there was court cases where the test itself got locked up in a court case over who discovered the test first or who discovered the virus first, and between us and the French, and it actually set us back because science couldn't even cooperate, and because they couldn't cooperate, the virus keep marching on, and then we're still trying to argue about who's going to solve it. So right now, countries going, bam, we're solving it now. Bam, governors taking charge. Bam, we're closing schools. Like, people are taking charge because in this situation, there was too much competition between scientists, too much conflict between people in the government, and because nobody was doing anything, it wasn't getting done. In fact, the Surgeon General in the 80s, Dr. Koop, he actually printed up a pamphlet on how you could get it and not get it, and how to be safe and how to stop fear. And he paid for it himself and mailed it to every household in America because he was pissed off that the government wasn't informing people. So right now, when they're really trying hard to inform you and put rules in place, they're doing that because we screwed up the first time, okay? It was also, there was other diseases that were more important. Like, you're make more money off of heart disease medication than you would of HIV. So people are like, forget that, we don't care, right? And there was a lack of funding for research. They didn't even have the right microscopes. So you needed electron microscopes, and they didn't have electron microscopes to find the virus. Watch the virus video. So because they didn't even have the right microscopes, we couldn't find the virus. So all this time was wasted. There was no funding. There was no money. There was no, there was too much competition. There was stigma. They were like, I don't want to work on that if it's going to be people who are gay. All that bullshit. All that bull, right, was nonsense. And it just messed up the whole situation even more. And then also ignorance, right? You're not aware if you have it. I can't get it. People thinking they're not at risk. Denial, like, well, I'm having sex, but I'm not going to get it from this guy, or I'm not going to get it from this girl. And that's dangerous. My really good friend Gary was home from college. It was his first spring break, and he had sex with this girl who he dated in high school. It was only the second person he'd ever had sex with, and he ended up getting it at 8 or 19. And he goes, I remember I was drunk and I thought, I'm not going to get anything from her. And at that time, when he got it in Colorado, there was only 300 people in the whole state who had it. So Gary's story is a big lesson to me because, you're thinking about, well, I'm not at risk. Well, you don't know. So you can't just assume that. There's also false information or belief that it can be cured. Only people in developing countries are getting it, right? Like right now, people for a while were like, that's just China, they're getting it. Well, not anymore. And that's what happens. We put those blindfolds over the jar of water, right? We put those blindfolds on over the problems in society, and we forget of what's really going on. Okay, just really quick, and then I'll log off. I can do more on this later if you guys want. If somebody wants to know some more about the fight against it later, just let me know and I'll make another video. So this is an AIDS quilt, and this is in my old school hanging up, so you can see by the size of the chairs how big it is. And this AIDS quilt we made, it was started by a guy named Cleve Jones, who's a big activist here. And you can see this. There's a block of this that's permanently on display at Grace Cathedral in San Francisco. But what this is he decided to make a quilt to show how many deaths were really happening. So a family, and you can still make these today and send it in. You make a panel, and this blue one is one person's story. This is one person's story. This is one person's story. This is one person's story. And what happens is this is 6 foot by 3 foot, which is the average size of a human grave. So on this, right, will be 8 people, right? And those 8 people each have a panel, but they're all different stories. This one, and then these are called a block. So this is a panel, and then you have 8 panels on a block. And you can see how big these are, right? And this is a very good friend of mine. Her name is Dorina, and this was her son and her son's best friend. And they made one for the best friend because nobody would make one for his family when they died. And here's another picture of it close up. And these are my students looking at it, another block of it, so you can see like how big it actually is. And then here it is laid out in Washington. So to put that in perspective, each one of these squares is 4 blocks. So the block I just showed you, each one of these is 4 of those. And then this is laid out in Washington. Here it is on the mall again. So like, right, each one of these is 4 blocks. And the whole point is just to show this is how many people are dying of this disease and nobody's paying attention. Here's a couple more blocks. This was a student of mine. It was her uncle. This is a really good friend of mine, and her son also passed away. I also met this mom. This is Freddie Mercury's quilt. This is Arthur Ashe's quilt. He was a famous tennis player and famous singer from Queen, right? And they both died of HIV. So hopefully that helps. I'll let everybody go for now. I'll read through these questions, see if there's some other things I can explain. Email me if you got questions. Message me if you got questions so that we can get them answered. So I don't want everybody to like not have any clue. So remember, you're getting 10 facts from each of these videos. So hopefully this helped. I wish we were in person to understand more. A couple books you can check out. The Band Played On. It's a true story of what was happening in San Francisco. And they also made a movie off of that. The Band Played On. I don't know if you can find it online. Obviously, I can't show it to you. It'll be copyright. But you can try to find this movie. It's like a movie, but based on the true story of this book. So anyway, maybe you can look for those things. Hopefully that helped. All right. All right. You guys can turn in the facts on, I don't see you today. I mean, I see you today, but like I don't see you Monday. So first and second block, you can turn the facts in on Tuesday. And then those of you who get this assignment on Monday, you can turn it in Wednesday. Okay. All right. I really hope you guys, this went okay. We'll just check it out and see what happens. All right. Love you. Bye.